In this video, we're going to look at parametric constraints. A parametric constraint is used to change or override one or more labeled constraint values of a template when the template is being processed in a corridor. So what does that mean? Let's take a quick look. We'll start by looking at our template library, and just for clarity, I'm going to turn off the point names. So each point is constraint has constraints. So we have a constraint 1, constraint 2. In this case, we have a slope and a horizontal constraint. Down beneath each one of these, we have a label that can be applied. So in this case, there's nothing done. I removed these intentionally, so I can type in my new value or paste it in, and so I have right lane slope for this label, and for my horizontal constraint, I can do right lane width. And then I can apply those. And once I do that, those are added to my drop-down list. So these other labels already exist in my template. So if I was using the same label in multiple, I could just pick from the drop-down list. So we're going to use, in our example, we're going to modify the right lane width. So we'll make note of that one. And let's also take a look at the pavement depth. So if you're wanting to modify the pavement, say for the surface course thickness for your entire corridor, you could quickly do that using a parametric constraint with a label. So the asphalt concrete surface course thickness label is applied to this point, as well as all of the surface course points in this template. If you're using multiple templates, you would want to make sure that the label is the same from template to template. In that case, you could then use the same parametric constraint to control that through the whole corridor, if that's the case you wanted to, if that's what you wanted to do. So let's move on, and we're also, in our example, we're also going to look at modifying this ditch width. So my right ditch width is set to 2 feet. We'll make that maybe 4 or 6 feet in our example. Lastly, I also wanted to just take a quick look. If we look at the properties of each one of these end conditions here, this is a right fill slope. And if I look at the other point here, notice it's the same characters you used, however, it's an uppercase and lowercase difference here in this example. And I'm pointing that out because we can also review all of our points quickly and easily by going to the Active Template tab and reviewing parametric constraints. So we can look at all the constraint values that are assigned, and so it's a quick way to also review, in this case, maybe my ditch width affixes were not applied when I placed this or created this, so the negative symbol was added to for the left side, and same with my graded shoulder width here. So I could come in and I could rename those if I wanted to, and that would take care of that label. When I select on any of these, you will see a blue box appears around the label that we're looking at. And if it's applied to multiple points, as this one is, you'll see that I have it's shown up here, a box at this point and a box at this point. Now notice the one where I had the lowercase is separate. But what I really would want those to be is the same, so I need to come in and edit those so that they're both uppercase. You will have issues with uppercase and lowercase differences. That's always sort of been the case, even with SS2 and SS4 modeling. So in order to modify that, I could, again, rename that right here, or I could click on the point and modify the label there. And when I do that, maybe I need to do it here at the point. So I guess what I will do is I'll go select it from the drop-down list so I know that it's exactly the same, and click apply, and close, and now come back and I'll review my parametric constraint. So now I only have one, and notice that all three of those points are highlighted. One other thing you can do here is, let's zoom back into our pavement, and let's say for this entire template I wanted to actually change my surface course thickness. Rather than going to each point individually and modifying the thickness, rather than doing this, for all 6 of these points, or however many there are, what I can do is, on my parametric constraint, is I can right click, click edit, and now what I'm doing is I'm editing the value of every single one of these, and when I click apply, now I have all of them edited. So if you were to do this, you are actually editing the template, and you really wouldn't be a need to use a parametric constraint then. So let me undo these, and we'll go back to our example. So let's go ahead and take a look at adding a parametric constraint to our corridor. Now, since we've made changes to our template library, we want to be sure to save those and then close our Create Template dialog. And then be sure to synchronize the template drop with the library. Next, what we'll do is, using our heads-up prompt, we can go to the corridor creation tools and use the Create Parametric Constraint icon, or from the Edit command or pull-down menu, we can use Create Parametric Constraint. Now we're going to be prompted to locate our corridor and enter our begin and end station. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add in a parametric constraint to widen or begin our lane widening here. So we'll add a taper essentially. So these values can be absolute, meaning it can be from the constant width, or it can be a tapered width. So from 420 plus 0, 0, and I'll just make it 420 plus 50. And I want to use my constraint label for the right lane width. If I wanted to change that, I can use the pull-down menu, or on the heads-up prompt, I could use my up and down arrow keys to make those changes. So data point to accept. And my start value is going to be 12 feet because that's the width that's in my template. And I want a stop value of 16 feet. And a data point to accept. And that corridor is automatically updated and it's processing now. So that's complete. Now I'll add in another constraint, and then I'll make it from 420 plus 50 to 423 plus 0, 0. And here I want it to be a constant width of 16 feet from my start and of my end. So we can see that's automatically updated. So now that we've added these two parametric constraints, we can review these a couple of different ways. One would be using the Project Explorer and Project Properties, and if we browse through our corridor and go down to our parametric constraint, you'll see that these bottom two are the ones that I just added. Begin at 420 and 420 plus 50. And when I select on one, it shows me my start station and end station, and then I can also look at the other start and stop values. You can also change the value or whether it's enabled or not. So we could disable this by setting it to false, and that would not process as part of the corridor any longer. And we can make changes to any of these values. So let's say if I wanted, instead of it being 16 feet, I can make that 24 feet here. And we'll see that that processes in our corridor again. So the second way we can look at it is looking at our corridor objects. We locate our corridor, and when we go to the parametric constraint section, you'll see here are the two constraints that we added. And again, we can go ahead and we can make edits to these right here within the table or on the right hand side. this dialog here. So if you're adding a bunch of these at once, you may want to disable the processing to make it faster for you. So we can do that by toggling off the rules here for a minute, and we can add in additional constraints. And those won't be processed until we're finished, and we turn that back on and process the code. So I can add in a new constraint, and I'm going to add in the ditch width that I wanted to change. So from 420 plus 0, 0 to 423 plus 0, 0. Now I'm going to select my label for my right ditch width, and I'm going to just make it a constant 8-foot width throughout this. So we'll see that the constraint was added to our corridor objects dialog, but nothing was processed in the corridor itself. Let's say we also wanted to add in, we wanted to widen the shoulder through here, so we use the same begin and end, and we should have a right shoulder width through this point, and I want to, select left. Let's start that over. So we'll add in start, end, my right shoulder width, and let's say we wanted that to be 8 feet, and 8 feet. So again, it did not process. So now when I reactivate my rules, the corridor, you'll see that the corridor is processing, and those changes should take effect. And they did not. So let me reprocess the corridor now. And now we'll see that our lane, or our ditch width was widened, our shoulder width was widened. Now we got some other issue with our point control here for our ditch width, but just for an example, we'll see that that changes. Now, if we look at our cross-section view, our dynamics section, the purple squares are point controls. So that was covered in a separate video. So we have some super elevation here controlling this point, but this is also being controlled with our parametric constraint. So you'll see when I change my shoulder width here, now I get a green box showing me that indicating that there's a parametric constraint on this point. If I move ahead a little bit, we can also see that that green box will appear on our ditch width, which we widened. Okay, so my green box for my ditch width is not being shown in this case. I'm not sure if that's a bug in the program or not, but what I did, I took a pause there for a moment, and I went in and I disabled the point controls for my super elevation and for my meandering ditch control there, just so I can try and fix that. But now you can see that my lane width is also shown with the green box for the lane width parametric constraint, as well as my shoulder. I imagine there should be one for my ditch width, but I'm not sure why that's not showing up here. So one last thing I wanted to show is if we wanted to add a constraint to, say, change our pavement buildup during the process without modifying our entire template library, especially if you have a large project, it could be a lot of templates. As long as you are consistent with your constraint labels as you were creating your templates, it should be a fairly easy process. So let's say I wanted to change my asphalt concrete surface course thickness, and I can do that for my whole corridor, or I'll just do it in the same section I've been working in. And just for an example, I'll make it 6 inches. And again, we could taper that value. I'm not sure why you want to do that, but you might want to do that. So I'll just make it 6 inches from begin to end, and we'll notice in our section view that that changes automatically for us. And then again, we'll see the green square indicating that we have a parametric constraint on all of those points. So this can be a very powerful way to process or make a lot of changes to your corridors or to how your templates were applied to your corridors. So we can do horizontal, we can do slopes, we can do vertical, and we can thickness. Those could be probably the most common parametric constraints you would want to use.